Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave Podcast. Your Marvel crew is back. We are here to finally discuss the rest of X-Men 97, the Disney Plus original series, animated series. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined by Michael Peniston.
Yo.
And also by Vinny Albano.
Hello.
So we did cover the first 5 episodes in multiple podcasts, but we've been busy doing a lot of stuff. If you guys didn't already know, we did get into Tribeca Film Festival, so we'll be covering that in June. There's a lot of other exciting stuff coming in June, but we had to wrap up X-Men. We got to talk about it for all the people that have been watching, and thank you guys if you did watch our original videos. If not, welcome to the channel. This is a show that we've definitely enjoyed throughout the whole entire experience, throughout the 10 weeks. But the back half of the last 5 episodes, we're definitely there's a lot to talk about. So let's start with the fact that we have this epic 3-part finale, right? Which is the opposite of what live action Marvel has been doing throughout the years since they started introducing these Disney Plus shows. What did you guys think of the whole season in general, and then kind of the way that they wrapped it all up in that nice, neat 3-part bow? Mike, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. This was definitely one of the best things Marvel's put out in a minute. The storytelling throughout all of this season was just so done perfectly. I remember the last time we spoke, just kind of I remember kind of just touching on how I loved the animation that they had done throughout this, but not only that, these characters, bringing them back and being able to touch on each of them in a certain light where we hadn't gotten to see a lot of these characters before. I had loved that. Moving forward with the other episodes, they continued to do that. These stories, that we had already seen, they continued those, but I felt like it even brought these characters in a different light than what we had even seen from the beginning half of the season. It's like a lot of they were able to change storylines and character arcs up in ways that I was genuinely not expecting. Again, I didn't watch the when X-Men, the original X-Men came out. I didn't really get to watch. I still haven't gotten to watch that. But it's just to me incredible the way that they were able to tie these stories between the past, the present, the future. Coming off of the live action movies, knowing that time and all of that has always played a factor with the X-Men. The way that they were able to integrate it into this was just so seamlessly perfect to me. Bringing up characters I don't know, Cable, I thought was an integral and super important part to all of this, being that that he was the son of Cyclops and Jean. And what's it called? But then also knowing the connection that he has outside of this and where we've also seen him, and not just with that character, with so many characters that they've done. It's just, I don't know, they did it so perfectly. The way that they were able to with Magneto, he was always coming into this season and this whole show. I know we thought that he was just badass, and the way that they kept that, but also. Spoiler, I don't know.
Yes. By the way, this is going to be, the show's been out now for a while. This is a spoiler review and discussion. So if you guys haven't watched X-Men 97 yet, you've been warned. We're talking spoilers. You can continue.
Spoilers. So no, the way that they're able to have him just be so badass, but then also bringing back in Professor Xavier and having him equally match that badassery. It was just so perfect. And I don't know. There's a lot I could say. I'm being a little vague just because there's so much that to cover. But it's just really, really cool that what they were able to do with this and how they were able to bring these characters into this universe while also showcasing some of the characters that we've already seen, and just building this world. It was perfect to me.
For sure.
Yes.
Vinny?
Yeah, I adore this show. I think from our previous 2 discussions, I've kind of expressed how much I loved the series from off the bat, but now that it's wrapped up, I already am missing it. And I just have high praise for this show, all around. There's very few flaws I have with the show. And like you said, Mikey, the character work and some of these character arcs are just so beautifully done. And you really care for these characters in such a short period of time. they bring you back into the world of X-Men in such a tasteful way. I just think this show is incredible all around. And also kind of, I want to pivot this, speaking of that finale. You know, we have Xavier come back, but we also have the introduction of Bastion, which is a villain that I wasn't familiar with, but I thought was so cool. Like the idea of this boy who has been now like biologically changed into a sentinel, like a sentinel organism, like half robot, half living, and he thinks that's his, you know, it's like in his biological coding to do what he is doing here. I just thought also his design is so like cool.
Yeah.
It feels very like authoritarian, which is like perfect for this force that he plays, this oppressive force that he plays against our main cast of characters. Yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about here, but overall, just high praise all around.
Yeah, I agree with what both you guys said. I think that it's really cool to see, and I think I brought this up off camera before we started rolling. It's really great to see something within the Marvel umbrella have real stakes again. And the thing that Bo DeMeo does so well with this series in terms of the writing and in terms of and the voice work and I mean so much of what sets it up. But it's the fact that they make the heroes feel vulnerable. Like they're real people that happen to be superhuman or mutants, obviously in this case, that deal with things like love and deal with things like loss and grief and bias and viewpoint and so many different things that sometimes get lost in things that are cloaked over with like a comic book thing, like a comic book, like, oh, this is based on a comic book. Oh, this is a superhero movie. That's not what this is. Like, this is a very nuanced, really deep series that happens to exist within the world of comic book characters, which is what I really appreciated so much with like what I grew up on watching with comic books and not being an avid comic book reader, but reading some, was the fact that like, again, like the DNA of what the first Iron Man movie was, and like what they did with the Captain America movies, that is baked in this. And this even existed prior to those. I just had like you, Mikey, and I think Vinny, you had said too, you hadn't watched, but the original X-Men, the animated series, like I haven't had a chance to watch it. So this is my first introduction to these versions of the characters, and they do the characters justice. There's so many awesome moments for every single character, which is so incredible that they're able to sort of weave in and out between different relationships and different sort of perspectives that different characters have. And like you talked about too, like the Xavier Magneto, and it takes a bit for us to get there in this series. But man, dude, it's like every time those two characters, and luckily I will say throughout even the identity of all the X-Men properties that I've seen, like even the live action films, that's been something they've always been able to do right, which I appreciate because so much is baked in the relationship between these two best friends that are basically brothers, essentially, that like have the same thought that they want to protect their own kind, but have differing viewpoints. And it comes to a head, obviously, like Vinny had just alluded to with the finale. So I definitely agree with you guys. I think the show, just echoing the sentiment, like we've really enjoyed the show throughout the 10 weeks. And it does suck. It's like, we got to wait now. We got to see. The one thing is we do know that season 2 and 3 have already been renewed. Season 2, I believe, is almost done in terms of like being wrapped, but I don't think it's going to come out probably until 2025, just because of what else Marvel kind of has coming. And I know What If season 3, they already said is going to come before that. And I also think the Spider-Man show is going to be coming as well. So those will be probably the two Marvel animated titles we get this year on top of the other shows like Agatha and what was the other show that's coming out this year? Or is that it?
There was a Wakanda show.
That's another, yeah, but I think they're just about starting to like lay the groundwork for it because that's been in development for a while.
Gotcha.
But I'm not sure if there was another live action series. I think there's one more.
I don't know.
Oh, we already got it. It was Echo. Yeah, we got Echo in January.
Okay.
So it was Echo. I think Agatha's the only other one this year. Daredevil's next year, I'm pretty sure. And then so is Ironheart. They just announced that's going to be next year too, officially. Okay. So we know that. But going back to this, let's go in the direction like Vinny had talked about too with Bastion. Because Bastion is a character, again, like this is the other thing that's so unique about the writing of the show. They're able to introduce characters or reintroduce characters if they're other, like, again, we talked about Mr. Sinister, right? And how, like, he's always been a character that we were hoping to see on screen in X-Men, but they've never been able to do it. And he gets kind of his moment in the sun throughout the series. But Bastion's only really a character in the show for, what, 4 episodes?
Yeah.
4 episodes out of a 10-episode series.
Yeah.
And boy, does he accomplish a lot. So Vinny, we'll go back to you because I know you definitely wanted to touch on it. The only thing I wanted to say before we get to you is the voice work, and I recognized that the voice was familiar. So I was like, this is definitely like a name actor. Theo James, who is best known for, I think he was also in like the Divergent films.
He was,
but I know him best for like season 2 of White Lotus, which he was so good in. He does such a great job as Bastion in this show. So Vinny, go to you, and then you can talk on Bastion, and then we'll go to Mikey.
All right, yeah. So the character, first off, having there's so many great moments throughout every single episode that like my brain is being flooded with these moments. I don't know which one to start with, but let's start with the Summers family, and there's a lot of irony around that because this is a version of Jean Grey that's technically not Cable's mother. It's Madeline Pryor that's the real mother of Cable. And then you have Cyclops, and you have Cable, who is years and years and years and years old, probably older than them at this moment. But they investigate Bastion's family home. And with that, we have a epic climax. Probably one of my favorite like fight scenes in the entire show, just because it's Bastion activates his Sentinel program, which is that he infected many civilians with a Sentinel organism, and they just become like zombies, like Sentinel
robot zombies.
Yeah,
it's insane. It's one of the craziest scenes I've ever seen in my entire life of watching content.
Yeah,
so many people.
It's crazy.
It is wild, and the action that comes from that is incredible. But I wanted to touch on that family dynamic because we see just through like quick flashback, we see Bastion's life story and when he was a boy and how this affected him growing up. And it is so riveting. Like, it is such simple, yet it's one of those situations where, like, less is more. Because just a little bit of flashback in a very well-executed flashback can give you just enough ground for Bastion to be an incredible force to be reckoned with. We see when he's a kid that he's struggling. He hears machines. Like he just like has this innate connection with technology, and it scares him. And from that, he grows a fear, and that Sentinel program in him, like he's going to kill all mutants. And I just found it very fascinating. But his relationship with his mother and how he also infected his mother with this Sentinel programming. And when the Summers family, there's a great line when they're investigating the household. The mom says to them and says, "Oh, you should think about having a kid. It's very nice." And Cable is right there. So it's like the irony of it because like Cable is like older than them in that moment, but like that's technically their kid. And they don't give each other any glances or anything either. But that one line I find so funny, but also so sad because it's not like a functional family. They want a functional family, but it was ripped from them. Madeline Pryor is dead. And then on top of that, Madeline Pryor was a clone. And now Jean's there, and Jean's trying to do her best to be herself. But it's it's incredibly nuanced and incredibly complex that it's so hard to even talk about it. You just gotta experience it.
Mhm.
And then on top of them having to send Nathan way into the future and then him coming back, as Cable. Just fascinating. Everything a part of it. I do want to talk before I wrapping this up, my thought. Episode 8's climax when everyone becomes Sentinel robots and the Xavier's school is on fire and it's being destroyed. One of the most badass animated scenes I've ever seen. You have Wolverine slicing through robots, and there's some great quotes. Like the one news reporter that Beast kind of has a relationship with turns to Wolverine and she's like, "You filthy Neanderthal," and just like sends him flying in the air, and he's slicing through, half his clothes are ripped off, he's slicing through, like skydiving down. Beautiful animation throughout. And then when he comes back to ground, everything is just chaos. You have Morph transforming into Juggernaut, and he's going crazy. Shout out Morph, love him. And then you have just so many, just chaos going on. But the thing I want to talk about, and if you guys want to talk about this too, when Wolverine comes back down, the Sentinels taunt him, and they're like, "Why are you fighting us?" And he's like, "I have 6 reasons why." Yeah. Then we got the GOAT. Nightcrawler teleports behind them. He has the sabers now. And he goes, "No, my friend. 9." And that scene, and they're protecting Rogue as Rogue is passed out and fatigued from the previous episode, which is such a nail-biting episode as well. Such a morally gray episode. Beautifully, just beautiful commentary as well. But they're protecting Rogue, and it's just this incredible animated sequence. And then Nightcrawler teleports Wolverine, and we get one of the coolest animated cuts I've ever seen, as it just purple and pink as just reality warps and it gets distorted as we see the perspective of Wolverine teleporting with Nightcrawler. And that is just, it's so cool. It is so cool. Anyhow, yeah, just episode 8 was the standout for me.
Yeah, I agree. Episode 8 was the end of episode 8. Was that when Magneto?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my god. That also was. If you want to talk about that, that monologue. I forget the blonde woman's name, but that monologue from her. It's so culturally relevant as well. Of feeling like deja vu, like. Most people are just going to look at Genosha, look at this mass genocide, just go on with their day, and just feel like a little bit of deja vu, but they're not affected by it. So they're just going to go on with it.
Yeah.
And then we have Magneto, and she's like, "Magneto is right."
Crazy. No, that episode was for sure. I remember even like during episode 8, like watching it, like, oh yeah, no, like even if I keep watching it, this is gonna be the one that like cements that this show is really good. Coming off of starting off with Bastion. Bastion, man, he is just like absolutely insane. I really appreciated episode 8 and touching on like those sort of like memory scenes that we got. And I love the use of just memory and why am I like losing the word? Like cutbacks. Flashbacks. I don't know why I forgot flashbacks, but like the way that they were able to integrate those into these scenes while effectively like also pursuing the story and like just like showcasing these characters again was just so genius, especially with the when you saw the flashback of Bastion when he was with his mom. And you saw him as a young boy, and you saw, like you said, like how it affected him at a young age. And I remember, like specifically, there was like a moment where like him and his mom were like sort of face to face, and it was like you saw his young face, and you saw his mom, and then when it cut back to him, he was like grown up again, and like immediately, and like that almost like caught me off guard. I was like, oh snap, I forgot, because you were so like, and that's what this show does. That's so good. Like you were so just like caught in the moment of this character. and knowing that they're all in some way or another just people that are truly affected by something that's like making them like the reason that they are, you know, whether it's their own abilities, their powers, the people that are actively fighting them because of who they are. All of these people are actively, or just because of them dealing with internal problems or things that, you know, they're all equally going through something. And so to see like to that how it's affecting him at a young age, this sort of thing, I don't know, it was just so like so striking. And then they're so quick with the animation, so it's so crazy. But then to watch him grow and to watch how it affected him, and to see like those moments where like he did infect everybody and had like the effect that it had, it was just so crazy. Like you said, it was so also like coming into the show, I would, like you guys said, like I would have never known anything about this character, or like even I would have never even imagined this story going the way it did. But just the way that they did, and then towards the end, especially with him, the way that they were able to build him up. Like there was a scene where, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to remember exactly which episode it was, but like Cable was like on the ground. And like
that was the last episode when he takes his arm.
Yeah, and then like
I was gonna bring that up too.
Oh my god! And just like, and I'm not gonna talk too much because I want you to equally have enough to say about it too. But just like the way that like he showed such power, like especially in that moment, like there was like a shot when you kind of could see Cable's perspective. It was like an animated low angle sort of thing, basically, where you looked up and you saw his wings kind of like come out, and you saw like, oh snap, this guy is like, is for real. And just like moments like that where it's like, again, I'm not going to talk too much about him, but Bastion was just like as equally as a strong force as characters like Magneto and Professor Xavier in this. And it's so just crazy to think that they were able to do that without like any sort of back.
Dude, such a short amount of time.
Right?
They make you feel every single bit of like the menace that guy is. But also understanding, like you both alluded to, and being able to relate and understand exactly why he feels the way that he does. Like his life has been fucked up, like genuinely.
Yeah.
And it makes you like, that's the big part of it too, which I know that when Marvel does, like the MCU does things right too, they're able to really give you a perspective of the villain that you can understand. It's like why Thanos works so well. It's like you understand why the dude wants balance. All he wants is balance. Like it makes sense. And the one thing that you did say that I want to touch on really quick is in terms of the characters too. Like so much of this is based in the fact that mutants are so hated by everyone. It's so racially charged. Like in a way that it's within their own obvious, like their own race as mutants. They're battling with human beings that don't want them there. They're battling with other mutants throughout the show, including the differing viewpoints of Magneto and Professor X. They're battling with Sentinels and Bolivar Trask and Bastion. Like it's insane that they're able to kind of squeeze so much into it. It does, like, part of me is like I'm never the type of person to be a proponent of like we need 22 episode seasons of things, but boy do we need 22 episodes for a season of X-Men 97. But the scene before you were talking about too with Bastion like just grabbing Cable's arm and like outstretching it and putting it over his body and making it his suit was like such an awesome animated moment. And I'm glad you brought up the teleporting, because that was something that I also noticed where I was like, that was such a fucking cool design. That was so cool that because they didn't, again, you don't have to do that. Like that's so much of what is the great thing about when you're able to be given the opportunity, and with animation, fortunately or unfortunately, you're given a little bit more room to do things visually. It's like the scene in Multiverse of Madness where I wish it's like they get that one scene where they teleport through all the universes, and I'm like, this is what this movie should have been. You know what I mean? Like, and you're not able to do that in live action.
And real quick, speaking of just real quick on that scene, I just want to shout out the people that worked on that teleporting scene and that whole infirmary scene. It was storyboarded by Chase Conley, Marvin Britt, David Maximo, key animators Jeremy Polgar, Nazir, Pasha, and Travis Simon.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Yeah, the sequence is awesome. So much. I mean, like, again, we can't make this episode 3 hours long, but if we could, we would. There's so much to talk about. You talked about the humans as the Sentinels, which I think was again such a cool and creative way to, like, again, they're basically robot zombies. It was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But we also get, and I think it's definitely relevant to talk about, we get so many cameos from other Marvel heroes throughout the back half of the season. So some of them that we'll shout out. I mean, Captain America plays a big role. He has a literal scene with Rogue in that episode 7. It is episode 7. Where he has a conversation with her. We get a quick cameo of Spider-Man. We get a cameo of Black Panther at the T'Chaka.
He even has a speaking role.
He does, talking to, I believe it's a senator, right? A U.S. senator, or is it the president?
I think it's President Kelly.
President Kelly, okay. And then we also get some glimpses of Silver Samurai. We get Iron Man. We get Doctor Strange. Morph turns into, like you talked about Juggernaut, but what about Morph turn into the Incredible Hulk, bro? Turn into the Incredible Hulk and telling those Sentinels to go fuck themselves, dude. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So cool to see that.
Yeah.
So what were some of the standouts for you guys, and what did you guys think about them being able to bring in the Marvel characters?
I thought that it was genius the way they did that. I kind of talked a little bit earlier in the episode, this episode, about that, but it was just so seamlessly perfect, and it was so needed. I thought, because I think that for a lot of viewers, this is like an introduction to the X-Men. And so, like, in moving forward, I know that they're going to start building off of this.
Which is kind of crazy to think about. Sorry to cut you off, but it is true.
Yeah.
Like, for anybody that had never, like, if your MCU stands, or even if, like, we're younger, but like, there could be kids that are just watching the Marvel movies for the first time at age 13, 14.
Yeah.
And they're watching this.
Yeah.
And that's, like, kind of insane to think about.
Yeah,
you know?
Even like the people that just got into it following like Endgame, that still have no idea of like the history of superhero movies and like how many were really there. There's so many people. And so it's just, and again, they're going to keep bringing them forward. Not only that, with it being the MCU and them wanting to integrate all of these heroes into one world already, like, this was the perfect way to showcase that, oh yeah, like, some of your favorite heroes have been living around these people, you just don't know them yet, you know? And like, they opened the door to where they could do so many different things. They could have another dimension or world be where the mutants have been living this whole time. They could just be that, like, we just haven't seen them yet because they're in hiding. It could be, and like they've been here this whole time. It could be a situation where like Kamala, like, where that was the first like name drop that we got of like a mutant, where like now they're gonna start to come about. Like, they just, like, at this time or stage, or for whatever reason, weren't really a thing. You know, there's so many ways that they could do it, and I thought that the way that they introduced these superheroes in this, they made it that easy for it to be open, to be able them to be able to do so many things. And so I thought it was perfect. It was also just nice to see these characters. Episode 8 was, when we, like how we were saying, was a highlight. That was also a highlight because Spider-Man was in that episode. And so when we saw Magneto fly up and you saw him look up, I was like, oh snap, like, these heroes are actively also affected by the things the mutants are doing. And like, when you saw like the heroes fighting off a lot of like the Sentinels or whatever, did I say that right? Sentinels, yeah. Like, just showing that, like, oh snap, like, the Avengers are involved in this, like, you know what I'm saying, like, and that will always probably be the case because the mutants are such a big factor of, like, the fact that the entire world at this point is basically involved in, like, either a hate towards the mutants or just everyone knows of them because they take up such a big part of the world. And so, I don't know, I just thought it was so, again, seamlessly perfect the way they did it. And now it would make sense for a mutant to appear in a project because now you've seen them just from this project.
For sure.
And I think they did the cameos tastefully as well. Because personally, I didn't want them to have like I didn't want them to be a big connection to the MCU. I was actually like, the post-credit scene and the ending, I didn't want it to be MCU related. I wanted it to be self-contained in its own thing, in its own world. And I didn't want it to be like we just get enough, right? That's all we need. Like, in terms of fan service, that's all we need. We just need like a little shot of Iron Man or Spider-Man witnessing and like you said, Mikey, like witnessing the fact that they are a part of the world and that the mutants' actions are also affecting them. But we don't need like a whole Spider-Man subplot and then like I don't know, Andrew Garfield walks in. It's like, whoa, what? No way! Like we don't need that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that it was just nice to see them, but it wasn't. They didn't try to make it like its own thing.
Yeah.
Which I like.
I don't know if you're gonna like my next point then.
Oh,
So
Okay.
I don't want to jump to, but all right. So that's just the cameos thing. But the show ends with it, like we talked about already. There's going to be season 2. There's going to be season 3.
Yeah.
Big, unbelievable. Like we can get into the nuance and the details of the final battle because there's so much in terms of animation. But so many of our heroes are separated by the end, and they're at different points in time. And they kind of just blip away as they're trying to stop this asteroid from crashing onto Earth. We don't have any. We don't know for sure exactly who did that. There's been speculation it could be Bishop, which makes sense. Bishop wasn't there for a while, and then he finally comes back to sort of save the day or do what he believes he needs to do in order to keep the timelines where they're supposed to be, which so much of this multiverse thing has to do with.
yeah.
But even more so is the specific place in which a lot of our heroes end up, which is in a past Egypt where they interact with the first mutant, Apocalypse, and Sabu Noor.
Yes.
But beyond that is the last shot that we get is our mutants looking out into this giant sort of fortress that is very reminiscent of a lot of the imagery we've already seen with Kang. And Rama Tut has a lot to do with that.
Oh, true.
Which is a variant of Kang. Now, that sends it in an entirely different direction because on one hand, as people that are as much in tune with the industry as we can be, if you guys didn't already know, Jonathan Majors is not going to be in another MCU movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we have seen him in live action play all these different versions of Kang.
Mm-hmm.
But this could be a very unique way in which they retcon that and they do something unique. I just think it's interesting that they picked that place in time and the comic book in which so much of that time period takes place is a battle between Rama Tut and Apocalypse.
True.
So it's interesting. That's all I'm going to say is interesting. We don't have to go crazy theory diving if we don't want to. But I do think that, again, so much of what is now built on the back of Marvel is the connectivity. Even the fact that in What If, the Watcher is always there, and the Watcher was in Loki for a shot.
Yeah.
That's a very short shot.
The Watcher's also in a shot in this series.
Yes. So I think there's gonna be some sort of connective tissue, plus the fact that, again, we're talking spoilers, so if you're already been tuning in, whatever. But the version of Beast that we now know exists within the fabric of the MCU and live action is very much catered of a mixture of Kelsey Grammer's version of Beast, but in the framework and the visual of the X-Men 97 Hank McCoy. So I do think it's going to correlate at some point. I don't know how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that it wasn't beaten over the head. This is theory baiting. I'm talking about things that I think could happen. But I'm saying it could create a unique opportunity for them to be able to find a new way in and either recast Kang or do something different with the character, because we all know Majors isn't coming back. But so much of that original plan was based on his character. I mean, they named the next Avengers movie after his character, which they obviously are now changing. But it's like, this can give them an opportunity. Plus, the show is so successful. I don't know. I just think it's interesting. That's all I'm going to say. I think it's interesting that they ended up where they ended up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to say about it or not, but we don't have to dive into it if you don't want.
I agree. I feel like I want them to focus more on just Apocalypse, though.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be like, a Kang thing, and then Kang is like the big focus.
Yeah.
Like, I think Apocalypse is already big enough for them. And we see him in the post-credit scene, too.
In present day.
Yeah.
So we're going to be dealing with two different versions of the character also. Possibly.
Yes, and he picks
But-
up Gambit's card.
Yes.
Playing card. Yeah.
which might be one of the horses of the apocalypse. We'll have to wait and see.
Woo!
And there's a very
Yeah.
there's a visual pointed thing to that too
Hmm.
when Xavier, which another, by the way, probably in my top 5 favorite scenes, also in the show,
Yeah.
when he's on, what's the planet he's on?
Forget the name of it.
I forget too, but
the-
he's in this intergalactic planet. He's being courted to be married, but in order for him to as a Terran, which was also interesting that got brought up, but I think that's probably in all the comics, but that just reminds me of Guardian.
Hmm.
But he basically, they're like, you have to forget about your life on Earth if you want this to happen. But he's like, and during this big conflict, he's like, nope, class is in session. And I just like, again, as a former teacher too, I'm like, this is fucking awesome. I was like, I want more of this. But he gets that vision of a skeletal version of Gambit,
Hmm.
which could easily be pointing to the fact that he might be the version of Death in Apocalypse's Horseman
Yeah.
of the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
So
Which would be dope.
it'd be crazy. Like, imagine what that would be like
Hmm.
when Gambit and Rogue finally, like, oh my god, I can't even imagine what that's gonna be like.
You guys just,
Oh, I'm so pumped for it. I'm so pumped for it.
you guys just completely blew my mind. Like I've been like sitting here trying to gather my thoughts for a minute now. I didn't realize watching it that was Kang's ship. I didn't even put 2 and 2 together.
Well, they might not go down that route.
They might not, but even if they do, I was not expecting that. And if they do tie it in,
Yeah.
that threw me off. I completely agree. I was souped when I saw Apocalypse on screen.
Mhm.
I was like, yo, they're like going this route. Not only that, to know that like the way that they're playing with time already this season, and like the way that this whole MCU season has gone, like this whole MCU saga
phase. Yeah.
where it's like the whole multiverse and them all affecting the multiverse. Like I was souped to that. I was like, yo, they could play a big role in like the creation of Apocalypse, and like a lot of his story, and like the way that they could like tell that story would be really cool. I wasn't expecting. I didn't really think about Kang throughout all of that. That would be
Mhm.
really tricky. I do remember hearing that they do still want to use that character in some way, shape, or form. And so, I mean, it made sense. It made sense. I'm not against it. I agree. I don't want him to be a power sort of character. I really want Apocalypse to be a focus. Even touching on the other parts of that ending, like to see like Cable at a different age, you know, with like the Jeans story and things like that. Like I don't
Yeah.
know. I think it's like the way it ended. I thought was perfect. To be
Yeah.
honest, I thought it ended perfectly, and it set it up in a place where I could see this, like you said, going on for a while, and wanting to be in. Like I'm very interested in what they have to show next, and so yeah, no, I feel like we've seen a lot of Kang already, and so it would be cool, like you said, to see that. But I wasn't thinking about that.
Well,
at
trying to make it more of an Apocalypse pointed thing. The other thing is like Apocalypse is such an important character in the comic books,
all. Mhm.
and I think it's great that they decided that they wanted to utilize him quickly within the animated universe.
Yeah.
Well, they did in the original animated series, but bring him back, I guess, for 97.
Hmm.
Especially because, like, if you have watched the X-Men movies, they really fucked up his character
Yeah.
Hmm.
in the live action movies. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm one of the biggest Oscar Isaac fans in the entire world. But holy shit, did they fuck up that character? And it was a bad experience for him, and it was a bad experience for Fox when they made the movie, and it just was a pile of shit, like, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So the fact that they can basically go back and make that feel earned, make that character feel earned in this universe, I think is really exciting. And
Mhm.
again, that whole thing with the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, it's such a unique, just going back to like kind of what we talked about in the first 2 episodes we did for this. So much is based on like the historical aspects of time, like and how anything that happens within this X-Men animated universe always goes back to like historical events or like political intrigue, and that's so cool. Like they're able to make it relatable to anybody and everybody. So I agree with you, Mikey. Like the way that the series ended, I was like really, really excited, and I'm because the cool thing with the show is that it all led up to this final sort of thing that it was building towards the whole time. Excuse me. Even if we didn't know that, but you're still getting these great individualized stories throughout every single episode, like these bottle episodes within the series that is leading you to the trail like of breadcrumbs. You know. Yeah. So, Vinny, do you have anything?
Yeah, I actually want to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I do want to talk about specifically Storm subplot and Rogue subplot. But speaking, I'll talk about that in a moment. But speaking of this finale, Wolverine, Magneto rips the adamantium off of his skeleton, which is a brutal scene, and we have a really sweet moment between Morph and Wolverine. Now, I actually saw on Twitter, DeMeo confirmed that Morph was like confessing his feelings towards Wolverine. And it's like it's sad. It's sad because, you know, Wolverine also is in that weird love triangle with Jean, and Morph has to transform into Jean and say I love you. I don't know. I felt that scene was very tender and very nice. And everything with Wolverine, I love him. He's my goat. He's my short king. So I'm curious speaking of the future going into season 2, I'm curious if he's no longer going to have adamantium.
Yeah.
Or if he's just going to have the bone claws again. You know? So I don't know. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. Or...
I don't know if I have a theory, but I do know. I mean, in terms of within superhero universes, you can never say never to anything. I do think that there's going to be a way in which he's able to get that back. It would be cool to see the bone claws for a little while.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to be like on the mend for a bit. Like I feel like he's going to be. I mean, that's another unique thing though. Like we don't know where Logan and Morph are.
Yeah.
Like they're the two characters we don't see in the as well as Jubilee and Sunspot. But we don't know where those characters are. So we don't know if they're stuck in a point in time. We don't know if they're stuck in the present and everybody else is in the past or in the future. Like it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So I don't have a theory necessarily, but again, seeing Storm get her powers back, I think by the maybe he'll be the big hero for season 2, which I could see. I could totally see that playing out that way, getting a nice redeeming sort of overall hero's journey.
I can see that too. I think it would be really sick to see the bone claws. I think that even in just like the way that however this release rollout with these characters are going to play and like the grand scheme of Marvel's plans, if they do plan on just releasing more of something like this before they touch more like a live action, their version of a live action X-Men, then doing whatever they can in this show to showcase to, again, those new fans just certain things with these characters that you might see in the future that like will then just make more sense. It would be a smart thing. So like taking like an example like the bone claws, like that's like any Wolverine fan would know that that's like something that like he had, and maybe for people who don't really know him, you know what I'm saying, like they probably don't even know that storyline as far as him getting that put him injected in his body. So it would be cool for them to showcase that if even they plan on bringing it to their own live action reiteration. You know, something like that. So it would be cool, but I'm not going to theorize too much about it.
I do want to talk about I want to talk about Forge and Storm because this is the only I think overall I love this show and I almost have no complaints. However, this is the only subplot in the show that I do have complaints for. And we talked about our kind of our flaws with it last discussion and how it felt really weird and kind of shoved in there.
It felt forced.
Forced is the right word to use. And even with the, I don't think they redeemed themselves with this episode either because
with part 2 you're talking about?
With part 2, with part 2. Because they, first off, like love seeing the Xavier stuff and it's important, it's integral to the plot. However, the Xavier stuff, we talked about how that previous episode was Storm's story was cut very short. It was only 9 or 10 minutes of that one episode. And also in this, her story is not really elaborated on to its fullest because we're focusing mostly on Xavier. So when we do get her subplot, it's very short and it doesn't feel well executed. I feel that if we just had a little bit more time, maybe one more episode with her to actually flesh it out and not feel so forced, that her regaining her powers, in my opinion, could feel a lot more rewarding than it was. However, I have one point. That sequence, however, in terms of animation and filming, and shout out the Newton brothers, because the score of her regaining her powers and her saying, I realized that I was just believing the lie. So fucking badass. I love that scene. I've been rewatching that scene because it's like Man of Steel. I'm pretty sure they actually took inspiration from Man of Steel. I saw it on Instagram
for the score.
Yeah, for the score and that scene where she
sequence.
regains her powers and she just takes flight. And it's just that is so dope. That scene is so cool. Her suit is beautiful. Like, she is just epic. I love Storm. And however, the one complaint is I just wish that the lead up to that was a little bit more rewarding. I don't know if you guys have any opinions.
I would agree with that. Because, like, Storm, I think I talked about this too. Storm's probably one of my favorite X-Men characters as well. And I think if you look at every single character gets their moment within the show. If anyone is robbed of a little bit more in terms of things being fleshed out in a proper way, I do think it's Storm's character. And the upsetting thing is that she has such a, which, I mean, I'm sure people could clip it out. It's like, we can make it a trending moment when I'm freaking out about how fucking awesome she is in episode 2 with the whole scene with the Senate. And she's just like incredible badassery. And I'm like, this is what I want to see in the MCU, like, so badly. But the thing is, like, you could have combined both of these Forge Storm episodes into one episode, and tell it as one story for her, and just play it out later in the season so that because I understand what they were trying to get at too. They want them to eventually join the team back up and have it be a big moment. But then at the same time, it's like, what do you take out? Like, it's hard. But I agree with what you're saying, Vinny. I do think that the whole thing sort of felt forced. And there's no, even as epic as that moment is, it's played against, like, so I was a fan even in the first part of that episode. I liked the video game aspect more. I think I was the only one. But then in this episode, the part 2, you're playing her against the first appearance of Xavier in the new season, in a very interesting story that is very different than anything we've seen in the whole show thus far. We're in a completely different universe. We're getting these cosmic sort of beings, and a lot of the complexities that come with where he's been, why he's doing what he's doing, plus his love and devotion for his X-Men. So it's gonna fail in comparison. Like, it just naturally, like, when you put almost any X-Men character against Xavier, maybe with the exception of Logan, like, you're not gonna get that same sort of nuance and that same sort of I don't know. It didn't. I agree with you. It didn't play as well for me. Did you have?
Yeah, no, it didn't play as well with me either. I remember agreeing back then when those episodes came out, as far as the Forge, that whole love story element in her, everything that they did with her. It was just, it didn't work. I will say though, 2 things. One, I did appreciate, like you said, that whole sequence of her gaining her powers back. I love that. I agree everything that you said. Vinny, it was spot on as far as that being just such a powerful scene for her. I agree. I wish that there was more of a build up to that. I will say, however, and maybe I'm like the only person to say this, that moment made me appreciate certain things from the previous episodes, but weirdly enough, not involving Forge. And so let me explain that, because that's really weird. So that moment made me appreciate Storm a little bit more. Like you said, Storm for me also has always been just like a favorite X-Men. And going back, I know that because she's one of the original X-Men, like she holds a lot. Her story holds a lot. But even within the sake of the MCU, I know that Storm's character is pretty important. If I'm not mistaken, I think she marries Black Panther at a certain point.
Yeah, in the Civil War comic,
Yeah.
during that she marries T'Challa.
Yes, and I don't know too much about like that sort of relationship aspect, but I do know that when it comes to her character, it isn't anything new as far as a love story sort of thing. I don't think that this was the place to showcase that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it made me appreciate that aspect of seeing Storm, because again, everything that I've been watching with this season, this show, this iteration of this, I keep thinking that and I could be completely wrong, but I keep thinking will at some point be brought to life in another form of a Marvel project after this. And they could expand on, I mean, obviously, Chadwick
passed away,
but his son being something, they could play into a future Storm, and that, you know what I'm saying? So it made me appreciate again the things that could be with that. And like, it's weird. It's not like me. I was really appreciating Forge. They could have done without it, the Forge, for all I care. Even his character, like he never really stuck with me, to be honest. Like he was always just kind of there, to be honest, for me. But certain beats made me appreciate Storm a little bit more. I'll say that.
Yeah. I'm definitely interested to see where they wind up going. I feel like we probably should be wrapping this up. So really quick hits. Maybe like one, and when I'm saying quick hits, I'm saying just say what it was and that you thought it was awesome. Little things that we might not have covered throughout this conversation, whether it's moments in animation, certain things. If you want, we'll start with Vinny, and then I have some moments too. Do you want to start with me so you guys can think about it, or I had a couple?
I have some moments.
You have some stuff. All right, so we can start with you, come back to me, and then we'll go to you, and then we'll sort of wrap it up. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Vinny.
So fan favorite for me was honestly the entire Rogue episode 7. Just seeing her dealing with grief, how angry she is. She goes on this revenge path against the government, and then ends up killing I forget his name, but one of the guys that worked with Bolivar Trask. She kills him, and then at the end, Bolivar Trask, that's the big reveal that there are human sentinels, and she also lets him fall to his death before they know that he is a sentinel. Everything with Rogue, I really adored that. I loved also another moment that was really cool. Jean Grey and Cable, once Sinister takes over Cable's mind, and Jean Grey and Cable kind of have this tension, and they have like this psychic like wave shooting at each other. Sorry, my allergies. But yeah, Wolverine badassery. I think that's it. I just wanted to point out Rogue.
Yeah, for sure. No, Rogue is probably the most standout character to me throughout the whole entire series. Like having Anna Paquin's performance, not necessarily complete, not her fault. Just Rogue wasn't really a character that I felt really got the benefit of the live action film. So I would agree with you, Vinny. A couple moments that stuck out to me. One of my favorite scenes in the show also is in episode 10 as the asteroid's coming down, or it might be right after the asteroid's coming down, but when Scott and Jean talk to Nathan, and Jean takes off Scott's mask so that he can see his eyes. Just a really, like, you talked about, like, the Morphin Logan scene, also a very tender moment to me, like, a real great tender moment of, like, parental and child. I thought it was really great and really well executed. And the score, I wanted to bring up a score thing too. When the asteroid is crashing towards Earth and they have that very classical version of the theme song. You know, do you remember what I'm talking about? Like the twinges, it's like doom, 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 and it's still playing in the right keys of what the theme song is, but a lot like it made it feel so epic on this grand scale. So those were sort of the big. Oh, and the reveal of Bastion's painting, which I thought was crazy with his mother when she's like, he always was so good with his artwork, and then Nathan Scott and Gene see this world completely run by Sentinels. I was like, holy shit,
Bro is a
dude.
psychopath.
Yeah, dude. Crazy. So those were some standouts to me.
Mhm.
Did you have any moments in particular that we haven't touched on yet?
I'm happy you brought up that last beat with Nathan and Gene and
Scott, yeah.
Scott, just because that to me was I felt like the most in terms of like vulnerability and like just like that raw emotion. To me, that was it. That was just because I've been so interested with Cable's story. Now coming ever since Deadpool, since he was interested, that was when I was introduced to him. And this, I feel like they did Cable a lot of justice in just being a lost boy that just wants his parents. You know what I'm saying? So like that sort of thing just kind of I loved how they did this story. I'll just touch on that, and then other than that, the beat, I don't know if we brought this up before, but the moment, I think it was in episode 10 when it's like a moment between Xavier and Magneto where they're kind of like face to face, and like I forget what exactly he's saying to Magneto, but it gives him that strength again. And then he like shoots up. He's like, "I am Magneto," and it's like I forget exactly what even built up into that, but something about that was just another sort of like raw emotion. Moment, which
you're talking about when they get like flashback to the bar. Is that what you're talking about?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
When they're yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, I know we mentioned it before, but the monologue when like the Magneto was right monologue, forgetting her name again. Is it to say here? Val, the blonde woman who agreed to work with Bastion and then set Magneto free. She said, we mentioned it briefly. I just want to say the whole thing because it's really powerful monologue. And she says, in Genosha, I felt a lot of things: pain, grief, admiration for those who fought, despite the odds. But you know what the oddest thing was? No one seemed shocked or surprised. Not even me. Yes, I was scared, but really, I just had the most profound sense of deja vu, as if past, present, and future didn't matter, and never had, because we always end up in the same ugly place. Thing is, Magneto knows us better than Charles ever did. Knows we know better. That most of us experience tragedies like Genosha as a bit of deja vu before getting on with our day. But the scariest thing about Genosha wasn't the death or the chaos. It was the thought. The only sane thought you can have when being chased by giant robots that were built to crush you. Magneto was right. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is.
Dude, the show is superior in its writing.
Yeah.
It really is. It understands its characters to a level that is so based in the origin of who these characters are, which is what makes it so unique. Like, it's not to say that, like, it's like when people talk about Tony and RDJ being the same person. And it's like, yeah, kinda. Like Robert Downey Jr. has embedded so much of himself within that character, and that's not a discredit to his performance, but that's so much of what it is. This is the characters. Like, it's so much of who they are, and so much in even demonstrated in that monologue. Like, there's so much that goes back to how Magneto is as a character and what he believes is right, and how he's been portrayed throughout all the films through the comics. So yeah, man, the show was awesome. Just give quick scores
for sure.
I am gonna go a 9.5. I think it's really close to perfect. I do think that, again, the storm kind of gets the short end of the stick a little bit, and there were some moments in terms of that whole kind of, if it wasn't a storyline within the show, I'd probably give it a 10, but because it still kind of played a part and it wasn't something that I really felt was well executed, it just barely misses a 10 for me. But the show is brilliant. It's one of the best things Marvel's done in years, like Mikey said. I'm excited to see season 2. I'm pumped. Mikey?
Yeah. I think I'm gonna give it a 9. I was gonna give it a 9.5 as well, but the Forge Storm thing, again, I appreciated some things with it, not the full thing. I also didn't really appreciate the Jubilee what's his
Sunspot
name?
relationship. Yeah.
I did in the end. I felt like that whole storyline was recovered in the end when like you kind of saw a lot of their ability come out more and how they like defended each other. That first episode, like the game episode, I remember you guys were like really into. It was still kind of like moments like that. I thought like okay, but it wasn't like a bad thing. It still was very this. I would not this show at all, and I'm very excited as well to see what they have to do.
Yeah. I agree with both of you guys. I'm giving it a 9.5. Okay. I adore it. I think, like you said, Darian, like it is near to perfect. Even like imperfect movies and television shows, I do give 10s. Mm-hmm. However, I would like to sit on this. I would like to rewatch some of it before I give it a 10. But it might become a 10 in the near future. We don't know. But 9.5.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, guys, that was our wrap up of season 1 of Disney Plus's X-Men 97, the sequel series to X-Men the animated series. We all really enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments what you guys thought about the series. Who were some of your favorite characters? What were some of your favorite storylines? Let us know what you guys are excited for with season 2. What do you think about maybe some theories that you might have going forward? Do you think they're going to interconnect this with the MCU in live action? Do you not? Let us know. We'd love to have a conversation with you guys in the comments. We're all big nerds, and we love to talk Marvel, DC, everything under the sun, basically. But yes, also follow us if you guys can on social media. We are at Cinema Wave Media as well as at _Culture Wave Media on Instagram. We're Culture Wave on Facebook as well as at Cinema Wave Media on TikTok as well as on Threads. Also be sure to, if you guys can, please subscribe to our channel. We're on the road to 500 subscribers right now. And be sure to give this video a like if you can. Share it with your friends. We've been going now for just about a year. We're just about at a year at the network, which is super exciting. It's super rewarding to be here and grow our team out and do a lot of really fun things. Like I said in the beginning, if you missed it, we will be covering the Tribeca Film Festival this year in New York. We'll have on-the-ground coverage as well as virtual coverage where we'll be reviewing films, previewing films, as well as hopefully doing some interviews with some of the talent attached. So please be sure to check that out as well. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I'm Mikey Peniston.
And I'm Vinny Albano.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.